String piecing, typically identified by thin lengths or strings of fabric sewn into a foundation, is used to create quilts that range from the seemingly haphazard to the carefully constructed. The technique serves as a way to stabilize pieces that would otherwise be too small or too awkwardly shaped to be useful in traditional quilt blocks. Thus, string piecing is often thought of as strictly utilitarian, a way of using up every last scrap as expediently as possible. Indeed, the foundation material of string-pieced quilts often speaks to that mindset. Repurposed newspapers and catalog pages, feed sacks, and brown paper bags can still be found backing tops that were never sewn into finished quilts. The shape of the strings in these waste not, want not quilts likely resulted from the scraps remaining after sewing clothing. A pattern piece cut out on the strain of grain leaves behind long, narrow strips. Home sewists saw their usefulness, and so did clothing manufacturers, including those that sold, quote, quilt bundles, the scraps left over from dresses, shirts, and pants. As factory-made clothing became more available, so did these strips, and string-pieced quilts proliferated. Despite their humble origins, not all vintage and antique string-pieced quilts can be categorized as utilitarian. Silk strings have been noted in an elegant quilt dated 1890, and utilitarian doesn't mean unlovely or unplanned. There are a few published blocks that contain string-pieced sections. Rocky Road to Kansas, published in 1890, is one. But the majority of string-pieced quilts don't use a pattern. The serendipity of the scrap bag and the eye of the quilter contribute to the end result. In his book, Unconventional and Unexpected, American Quilts Below the Radar, 1950 to 2000, Roderick Kirchhoff writes, "In some quilts we can surmise that the maker started out with a traditional pattern and, for whatever reason, upended the route and swerved down a different path. She either had a different vision of what her quilt ought to look like, or she simply allowed the creation to flow through her by happy accident." String piecing lends itself equally to happy accidents and intricately planned designs alike. Enjoy the artistry of this versatile approach to quilt making.
Strip quilt, 58 inches by 58 inches, 2019. Made of cottons, linen metallic blends, fused and machine pieced. Made by Tara Fawnin. A freelance textile designer, teacher, and quilter from Oakland, California, Fawnin is inspired by forms, shapes, and color interaction. She meets weekly with a group composed mostly of art quilters, and they introduced her to glue sticks and fusible web. During a retreat with Rosalie Dace, Fawnin started to work with fusible construction and line, and continued to play with the concept in little roughs. She found that actually sewing her concept pieces ruined the lovely lines, so she continued with the fusible technique. This piece was born of her desire to continue her exploration of line and form and the subtle spaces in between. String X, 68 inches by 73 inches, circa 1950 to 1975. Cottons, plain muslin backing brought to front. Maker unknown, loaned by Roderick Kirchhoff. Author, collector, artist, and consultant Kirchhoff is perhaps best known for his seminal volumes The American Quilt, A History of Cloth and Comfort, 2004, and Unconventional and Unexpected, American Quilts Below the Radar, from 1950 to 2000, published in 2018. It is in this later volume that Kirchhoff thoughtfully shares his appreciation for numerous string-pieced quilts, a number of which he graciously loaned for this exhibition. His insights are in large part responsible for an awareness and wider appreciation of this typically less than revered quilting form, and the volume has inspired countless contemporary quilters and artists. Unknown or original design, 66 inches by 83 inches, circa 1950 to 1975. made of cottons, cotton blends, and upholstery fabrics, hand-pieced, hand-quilted with pink thread, top brought to back. Possibly made by Jessica McAdams, loaned by Roderick Kirchhoff. One patch with string, 71 inches by 79 inches, circa 1925 to 1950, made of cottons, hand-pieced, hand-quilted, with blue chambray backing brought to front. Maker unknown, loaned by Roderick Kirchhoff. String lattice, 64 inches by 76 inches, circa 1950 to 1975, made of cottons, hand-pieced, hand-quilted, with binding on 3 sides back to front. Maker unknown, loaned by Roderick Kirchhoff. String with crosses or string with grid, 68 inches by 76 inches, circa 1920 to 1950, made of cottons, hand-pieced, hand-quilted, with blue checked fabric backing, front brought to back. Maker unknown, loaned by Roderick Kirchhoff. Untitled purple and brown, 80 inches by 86 inches, made in 2013. 100% cotton, recycled and new materials. Machine pieced, hand-quilted, with embroidery to reinforce minor flaws in recycled materials. Made by Sarah Nishira. Chicago-based Nishira's quilts are frequently inspired by geometry, and here she plays with the idea of a vanishing point beyond the top edge of the quilt. Her fondness for string quilts includes an appreciation for the way that one contrasting string creates a visible skeleton and provides continuity. Though this string-pieced quilt is decidedly modern, Nishira acknowledges a connection to historic quilts and those who made them. In that tradition, Nishira recycles clothing and other vintage fabrics. The randomly pieced browns in this quilt are mostly men's shirts, and hand quilts her work. Untitled Purple and Brown evokes an aerial view of a landscape or of a skyscraper viewed from the ground up. The randomness of the brown strips creates an impression of something organic beneath the geometry. Last Bits, 40 inches by 40 inches, made in 2017. Cotton, hand-pieced, machine and hand-quilted, made by Fern Royce. The idea of using any and all scraps of any fabric content and size especially appealed to Fern Royce, a Northern California-based quilt artist and teacher, but she disliked traditional methods of fabric and foundation piecing. Discovering Gwen Marston's foundation-free method enabled her to create traditional and improvisational string-pieced quilts. Last Bits is composed of varying widths of strips left over from other quilts, which she inserted diagonally into neutral squares. The string squares are set in rows creating X's and O's, which create a secondary pattern of broken dishes in the neutral background. Down the Rabbit Hole, 43 inches by 52 inches, made in 2018. Cotton, hand-pieced, machine quilted, made by Fern Royce. This quilt is a perfect example of me dreaming of strings. The block is a variation of a traditional 9-patch. I wondered what would happen if I replaced the 4 squares and corner pieces with string-pieced squares and triangles. I loved the result, but then faced the dilemma of how to set my new string blocks. For a number of weeks, I moved the blocks around and played with settings, finally settling on sashings and posts. The only posts I truly liked were a mini-me version of my 9-patch variations. I had decided a 3-inch sashing looked best, which meant the 9-patch posts had to be very small. 3-inch block finishing at 2.5 inches. As string crazy as I am, I did not use string pieces in the tiny 1-inch squares and triangles in the posts. Instead, I chose the brightest and most colorful fabric scraps I had to mimic the colors in the larger blocks. The quilt's name is a reference to each of the design decisions I made along the way. Each decision pushed me deeper, taking me down a fabric version of a rabbit hole. Pencil string quilt, 46 inches by 46 inches, made in 2019. Cotton, hand-pieced and machine and hand-quilted, made by Fern Royce. A photo on Instagram of a wooden quilt made from discarded pencils by Laura Petrovich Cheney gave Royce the nudge to recreate it in fabric. Working with small strips from 3/4 inches to 1.5 inches, she incorporated the cut-off strips that remained after squaring up blocks. The yellow star blocks included every yellow print she had in her collection, including those previously deemed too distracting. The dark background fabrics include a bag of fabric scraps she'd set aside to donate, deeming them too dark to use. All the fabric choices for this quilt reinforce what she has been telling students for years. There are no ugly fabrics, they just haven't been cut small enough. The machine quilting between blocks was enhanced with the addition of big stitch hand quilting using number 12 Pearl cotton. String of Diamonds, 64 inches by 76 inches. 1930s top, quilted in 2018. Cotton prints and feed sacks predominate. Machine pieced, machine quilted. Maker unknown. Quilted and loaned by Teddy Pruitt. Pruitt worked as a quilt appraiser for many years, retired, and then in 2016 returned to the lecture circuit. She purchased this 1930s, 1940s top from quilt historian and dealer Julie Silber many years ago. In 2018, to dress it up for lectures and classes, she added batting, a 1950s era burnt orange floral drapery panel for backing, and applied minimal quilting. Kitty Plays with Strings, 72 inches by 94 inches, made in 2010. Cottons and polyblend cottons, hand-pieced, machine quilted. Made by Louise Kathleen Reed, quilted and loaned by Teddy Pruitt. Pruitt's aunt, Louise Kathleen Reed, better known as Kitty, hand-pieced odd sizes of string blocks from the 1970s and 1980s fabrics left over from making cathedral window quilts. When she decided she'd never actually make a top, she gave them to Pruitt, who cut them down to a uniform 4.5 inches and put them together with double sashing in 2010. Kitty was amazed at how beautifully it turned out. Black Hills Gold, 66 inches by 86 inches, 2019, cotton. Made by Teddy Pruitt, quilted by Liz Torrance. Pruitt developed this pattern for classes and has made 3 samples to sell variations, pinks and browns, totally random scraps, and this one. Its success, she feels, is in illustrating that a string quilt doesn't have to look scrappy or country. It can be quite sophisticated. This piece was quilted by Liz Torrance of Gainesville, Florida in November 2019. The pattern is available from Pruitt's website and in the Iowa Quilt Museum shop. Red Strings, 82 inches by 94 inches, made in 2012. Cotton, all techniques by machine, made by Teddy Pruitt, quilted by Karen McMahon. While clicking through Pinterest, Pruitt was stopped dead in her tracks by a string quilt in a style she had never seen. The picture had no attribution nor directions, so she figured out how to make it work. After posting the top on Facebook, she was immediately informed it was a design called Fandango by Karen Griska. To be honorable, I paid the $5 download fee for the pattern after the fact, she says. Pruitt, who teaches string piecing classes, got requests to teach the pattern and wrote Griska. Pruitt proposed that she would teach her pattern while adding her own instructions, and she would pay Griska a download fee for each student. Griska agreed, and the class, called Ravishing Ribbons, is a success. Easy Access, 74 inches by 88 inches, 1950s top, layered and finished in 2019, from Pajama Factory Remnants, all techniques by machine. Maker unknown, quilted and loaned by Teddy Pruitt. Pruitt has always been drawn to scrap and multi-fabric quilts. I'm easily bored and they give me a lot to look at, she says. She also appreciates Southern quilts and the make-do, use what you have, leave no waste philosophy. This quilt from her collection meets all those criteria. A wild kaleidoscope of movement, it was stitched from factory cutaways from 1950s seersucker pajamas. Pruitt especially appreciates that labels are still visible, so it's clear the top was made from easy-on, easy-off pajamas. After showing the top for nearly 30 years at her lectures, in December 2019, she layered it with warm and white batting, used a bedsheet for backing, and applied minimal quilting. String-pieced hexagon quilt, circa 1930s, made from cotton, backing from flour sacks, hand-pieced, hand-quilted, maker unknown, loaned by Siobhan Ferguson. Lecturer and teacher Ferguson purchased this circa 1930s quilt in the southwest United States. Cotton strips pieced into a plain muslin backing create strings of hexagons. The backing fabric includes a Robin Hood flour sack and 3 best flour sacks from Yukon, Oklahoma. The batting is cotton and is quilted with an all-over Baptist fan design. Ferguson's interest in string piecing came after taking a workshop with renowned teacher and quilter Gwen Marston. Ferguson's quilt collection provides inspiration for her own quilts as well as for the students she teaches. Turning Point, 40 inches by 45 inches, August 2020. Cotton, hand-pieced, hand-quilted, made by Sujata Shah. Graphic designer and textile artist Shah originally hails from Mumbai, India, and is based in the San Francisco Bay Area. She draws inspiration from the imperfections and irregularities of free-spirited folk arts and crafts from around the world. Turning Point is Shah's interpretation of a kawandi, a utilitarian quilt made with found and collected scraps by the African diaspora of India. While making any quilt, her goal is to create energy and flow with a riot of color and value. With no specific end result in mind and working from the outside in, this intuitive process has made Shah focus on the present and also be spontaneous. Snake Trail, 68 inches by 82 inches, circa 1950 to 1975. Cottons, hand-pieced, tied with pink string, some straight-line machine quilting, no batting. Maker unknown, loaned by Roderick Kirikoff. String with broken grid, 66 inches by 83 inches, circa 1930 to 1950. Cottons, hand-pieced, machine quilted, with backing brought to front. Maker unknown, loaned by Roderick Kirikoff. Strip or string star, 77 inches by 86 inches, circa 1910 to 1940, of cottons. Hand-pieced, hand-quilted, muslin backing, and applied binding. Maker unknown, loaned by Roderick Kirikoff. String strips, 79 inches by 96 inches, circa 1950 to 1975. Cottons, hand-pieced, hand-quilted, with plain blue muslin backing brought to front. Maker unknown, loaned by Roderick Kirikoff. String diamonds, 63 inches by 78 inches, circa 1950 to 1975. Cottons, hand-pieced, hand-quilted, with plain muslin backing and applied binding. Maker unknown, loaned by Roderick Kirikoff. Serpentine web, 70 inches by 80 inches, cotton. String pieced on paper foundation, machine pieced, computerized long arm quilted, made by Bonnie Hunter. This quilt appeared on the cover of String Frenzy, published in 2018, and one of Hunter's 8 books. It's a modern interpretation of the traditional spiderweb block, created by setting the blocks with a half-block drop in every other row, resulting in the serpentine effect. Finding different settings for string-pieced blocks is a passion of Hunter's. Give me a bucket of fabric strings and strips and I will happily piece myself into oblivion, she says. String variation or chevron string, 64 inches by 78 inches, circa 1930 to 1950, cottons, maker unknown, loaned by Roderick Kirchhoff. Straits of Mackinac, 94 inches by 94 inches, cotton, string piecing on paper foundation combined with traditional patchwork units, machine pieced, computerized long-arm quilted, made by Bonnie Hunter. Author and teacher Hunter heads up the active online community Quiltville and is known for her love of scraps and her myriad ways of using them. After teaching at a needle arts seminar at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island, Hunter created this quilt and named it for the series of narrow waterways that connect Lake Michigan and Lake Huron between Michigan's upper and lower peninsulas. The main star in this block was featured in Quiltmakers Magazine 100 Blocks by 100 Designers, Volume 14. After creating that block, Hunter knew she wanted to create a full quilt. Emerald City, 84 inches by 84 inches, cotton, string piecing on paper foundation combined with traditional patchwork units, machine pieced, computerized long-arm quilted, made by Bonnie Hunter. String pieced Drunkard's Path, 43 inches by 50 inches. Repurposed scraps, mostly cotton, machine pieced and machine quilted, made by Sherry Jimerson. Pensacola, Florida-based Jimerson inventively repurposes scraps and sells her creations through her Etsy shop, Simply Scrappy Store. Red Sun, 40 inches by 40 inches, 2015, cotton and cotton batting, made by Ann Brower. Massachusetts-based Brower grew up on a family farm in Illinois, surrounded by quilts stitched by her grandmother and by the wide-open Midwestern skies. After attending Coe College in Cedar Rapids, she transferred to school in Boston. On visits home, she remembers being struck by the enormity and promise of the sky above the lush fields of the Midwest, and this quilt is an attempt to capture that feeling. Brower's quilts are machine sewn one strip at a time. She stitches through the fabric strip and cotton batting simultaneously, then quilts the piece intensely to give it structure and texture. String Pieced Quilt, 2016, made by Linzee McCray. I learned to string piece from a member of the Old Capitol Quilters Guild, Phyllis Rosenwinkel. I fell in love with the technique instantly and have gone on to teach string piecing classes. One of the reasons I love it so is seeing the bits of fabric I've used in other quilts. Every one of the strings in this quilt is a scrap from another, and constructing it brought back memories of time spent sewing and of the people who received the quilts.